Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to address the number of times that Congress has dropped the ball when it comes to our budget. But I'm also here to say that we can fix it. Last year, Congress passed the only law I have ever seen that was designed to never be enforced. It's called sequestration. Sequestration was actually designed to cut spending across the board in a way that was so offensive and so illogical that it could never survive as a law. It was a law that was meant to unify both sides of the aisle in an effort to develop a comprehensive deal to fix the economy and our deficit. A responsible Congress could have stopped those ridiculous cuts. In fact, I agree with Senator Mark Warner, who happens to be a former governor who had to budget his state of Virginia's budget. And he called, and I quote, he called this stupid. Mr. Van Hollen, who I work with on the Budget Committee, introduced common sense legislation that would have responsibly reduced our deficit and ended the sequester. Unfortunately, the Republican majority refused to allow an up or down vote on this floor for that straightforward legislation. They doubled down on irresponsible policies based on an economic math that we now know is completely flawed. It reminded me of a story. Two guys are in a lifeboat, and the one holding the oars says, "This is a bad situation, and one of us ain't going to make it." It doesn't take a genius to figure out who the guy with the oars is talking about. All of us are in this lifeboat together, and we know where the majority stands. They're not rowing for the middle class. They're just fighting to protect billionaires and make sure their special interests keep their tax breaks. We know families, businesses, and communities continue to be hurt by what we do or don't do here in Washington. You've all seen it. FAA furloughs are causing flight delays. Just one example of how we're continuing to hurt our economy. We can do better. We can write legitimate, measured budget for this country. Mr. Speaker, return this House to regular order. Our House has a budget. The Senate has a budget. Let's go to conference and start negotiating a real American budget. The American people deserve some certainty, and they certainly deserve to know what priorities are important to their elected representatives. For those watching at home, why is the conference committee so important? Because there are vast differences between the budgets currently on the table. A conference committee negotiates in full view of the public on principles and priorities that set funding for the next fiscal year. Let's talk about this like my Republican colleagues' favorite thing to talk about. Let's talk about it like people do at the kitchen table. If paychecks are cut or an unforeseen emergency happens in a family, families don't just pay 10% less on their mortgage or require 10% less of the medications they depend on. Instead, we make smart cuts. We stop buying the things we don't need, but we don't stop educating our children. At least in my house, my wife and I don't decide what's important to us and ignore everyone else. That doesn't work in families, and it doesn't work in Washington. We sit down like adults, at least we should, in Congress, around some kitchen table and figure out what we can buy and what we can't. We work through today's needs and plan for our future. We don't stop investing in our families. Like Senator Warner says, that would be stupid. The House and the Senate need to get around a table, any table. If you can't find a table here in the Capitol, come to my kitchen table. We must create an American budget that invests in job growth, educating our future workforce. We can make cuts, but cuts that make sense. Let's root out the waste, let's root out the fraud and abuse, and cut tax loopholes to make sure everyone pays their fair share. The American people have shown us what to do. Let's get around a table, let's name conferees and show the people who sent us here that we can be responsible and keep the promise of the American dream a reality. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been honored to be elected at the state legislative level in California. I've been honored to be a council member, and now, since January of this year, I've been a member of this body, and I'm very, very disappointed. I've never in my life, in business and at home and in elected office, I've never seen a situation so stagnant, so stale, and so damaging to the people who sent us here to represent them. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman.